The bells rang at midnight sharp, just like they had every night. 4 nuns bowed in silence inside the chapel. Candlelight flickered, shadows long, and scripture whispered beneath breath. Sister Margaret led the prayer. Her voice trembled that night. Said the ground felt different, like it was breathing back. The others laughed softly, until the floor creaked once. Sister Eloise swore she heard someone say her name. Not loud, not human, just inside her ear. She looked up. The other nuns kept praying, unshaken. The air thickened. The candle nearest to the altar turned blue for a single second, then went out. Sister Agnes gasped. Sister Clare kept praying, unmoved. They finished the midnight chant. Margaret stood, made the sign of the cross, opened the back chapel, door for air, but saw only fog, dense, frozen, too heavy. They stepped outside together, just a moment, just to feel the wind. But it wasn't there, just silence, no sound, no stars, like the sky itself had blinked. Footprints vanished behind them. Fog swallowed the gravel path. Eloise turned around and whispered, "Did anyone shut the door?" They hadn't. But the chapel was no longer there. One scream, cut short, then 3 more. Not loud, just muffled, like sound being pulled under a floorboard. Then silence returned, and the bell tower crumbled before dawn. When the villagers found the ruins, the chapel was gone. Not burned, not collapsed. Gone. Just stone outlines in the grass and 4 crosses laid flat in the dirt. And no one ever saw the nuns again. By morning, the chapel foundation was exposed. Just earth and stones, like something ancient had been unearthed. No smoke, no ash, just ground that looked too soft to hold history. Father Jonah arrived first. His hands trembled as he stepped into the grass where pews once stood. The altar had become moss. The bell was buried in soil. He whispered their names aloud, one by one. No echo answered, just birdsong cutting through silence. But not a single bird perched near the ruin's edge. They searched for hours. No footprints, no blood, no signs of collapse. Just vanished like a page torn from scripture. The sisters' things remained locked inside their quarters. The Vatican sent word back. Pray. Do not dig. Leave the grounds undisturbed. But the town could not forget. And the bell rang again the next midnight, on its own. It became routine. Midnight chimes. Same time, same sound. No wind, no rope. Villagers said the sound traveled backward through their dreams. Some began avoiding the church at night. The priest lit candles daily, but they never stayed lit. Even at noon, the chapel's shadows crept longer than they should. They bent, stretched, refused to leave the stones. Rumors grew. The nuns had sinned. The forest had swallowed them. They had become part of the ground. But no one dared say it out loud near the ruins. Children dared each other to cross the outline. Some did. Some came back crying. One boy returned humming a prayer no one had taught him. And every March 12th, A single white candle appeared in the grass, lit, untouched, surrounded by untouched snow. The bell was removed 5 years later. Too many complaints, too much fear. They cut it loose, dragged it to the village square, and let it rust. But it still rang, not from the square, from underground. A low echo, soft, barely heard, but it pulsed in the stomach like hunger. One woman claimed to hear voices beneath her floorboards, chanting in Latin. But she'd never learned Latin. Her son recorded it, played it backward. 4 names repeated: Margaret, Eloise, Claire, Agnes, each whispered like breath over glass. A 5th name came last, one no one recognized: Domina. The church's records were reviewed again. The 5th name didn't exist. No 5th nun, no trainee, no visiting sister. But the chants never stopped, including her. People stopped walking near the site. A fence was built. Didn't matter. Every photo taken near the area blurred. Trees leaned away. Grass refused to grow inside the foundation. A man fell through the soil while walking his dog. No cave, no rocks, just soft earth that swallowed him up. He climbed out, hands bleeding, holding rosary beads. The beads weren't his. The engraving on the cross said, Claire. He gave it to the priest, who locked it away in a drawer. That night, every crucifix in the rectory cracked across the arms, and outside, near the ruined chapel, footprints appeared in sets of 4, barefoot, pressed deep into snow that never melted. 28 years passed. Most forgot. The town changed. The trees returned. The chapel was overgrown, a ruin buried in ivy and memory. A boy named Julian came home for spring, visiting grandparents, found an old spade in the garden, decided to dig near the woods for fun. He didn't know the story, didn't ask. But the ground felt soft, unusually soft. The earth gave way in layers, as if it wanted to be disturbed. 2 feet deep, he hit wood. Not rotted, not old. Clean. Preserved. He wiped it with his sleeve. It was a Bible, wrapped in linen, tied with rosary beads. Julian opened it. Inside, the cover, 4 names, 1 per page. Margaret, Eloise, Claire, Agnes. Each page stiff, smelled like pine, and 1 signature written in something dark. The final page was stuck together. He peeled it slowly, found red lettering, still wet, still warm. The ink spelled Domina. He dropped it and ran, but the woods echoed back his name, softly, repeatedly. Julian, Julian, Julian. When he returned with his grandfather, the Bible was gone, but a white candle sat where he'd dug. Lit. Upright. No wind moved its flame. The priest fainted upon hearing the name. Domina, he said, wasn't a name. It was a title. He told Julian never to dig there again. But the next night, the ground cracked open. The title Domina was reserved for the unspoken, a sister above sisters, one that leads through silence. Records showed it hadn't been used since 1452. Father Jonah confessed he'd heard it once before, in a dream. A voice like roots pulling through bone, a hand reaching from behind stained glass. He returned to the site alone. At sunset, the trees hummed, the grass bent, and a circle of melted snow surrounded the exact spot Julian had dug. Inside the circle, a rosary, but made of wood and teeth. A cross shaped like a woman kneeling backward. He didn't touch it, just stared, prayed, sang a psalm, but the wind pushed the sound back down his throat. That night, he burned every candle in the rectory. Still, the chapel foundation glowed with light that wasn't fire, or moon, or mercy. Julian dreamed of nuns again, standing at the foot of his bed, but none had faces, and all pointed toward the forest. He followed their direction in the dream, woke with dirt under his nails and pine needles in his hair. Outside, the rosary sat on the porch, wrapped in the linen he'd dug up. No tag, no note, just one carved word in the beads: stay. And deep in the woods, a new chapel bell rang. The town hadn't built anything new, but a bell tower stood by dawn. Rough wood, no nails, moss between slats, and one window shaped like an open eye. The boy approached it. Others followed. No door, just a staircase carved into the tree beside it. Each step hollow, echoing with whispers. At the top, no bell, just a wooden cross carved backward. Beneath it, 4 robes folded neatly, still clean, still warm. The priest returned, declared the ground cursed, but when he tried to burn the tower, the flames reversed direction, sucking inward like breath. One boy threw a rock. It never landed, disappeared mid-air. He left town the next day. Couldn't stop bleeding from the palms. Julian stood at the tower every night, said nothing, just listened. Sometimes he nodded, like hearing instructions. He stopped talking to his grandparents, wrote in Latin, dreamed in chant. The wind near the tower carried voices, not in words, in tone, like someone humming across dimensions. The last page of the town's Bible turned black, and the foundation of the old chapel cracked wide open. Beneath the cracked ground, they found stairs, spiral, smooth, as if carved by breath, not hand, moss-covered, leading deeper than should be possible. Father Jonah descended first, Bible in hand, crucifix clutched. He didn't speak, just vanished past the 5th turn, never came back up. Julian followed 2 days later, said he was invited. The townspeople heard music from the hole, not eerie, beautiful, full, like cathedral choirs sung by soil and memory. They lowered a mirror, saw nothing, only light, and something kneeling at the bottom, hands clasped, head bowed. The boy returned a week later, eyes gray, lips cracked, voice soft. Said he'd met the sisters. He said one wasn't human. The rosary changed again. The wooden beads grew, now carved with scenes, chapel, forest, 4 women kneeling, one standing upside down. Julian placed the rosary on the altar of the new tower, and the bell finally rang. once, loud, final. The Bible returned, sat at the church gate in a box of pine, still wrapped in linen, still tied, and one page still wet, though it hadn't rained in weeks. The blood didn't dry. It pulsed faintly under candlelight. When read aloud, the page whispered, "Along." Same words, different voice, female, ancient, hollow. The priest called the diocese. No one came. Phones rang endlessly. The Vatican email bounced. His letters returned with no stamps, just wax sealed in black. Julian kept the page in his room. It glowed when he slept. Once it hummed. His pillow smelled like incense and iron. One morning, his eyes were bleeding lightly. He smiled, said he saw Sister Clare in a dream. She wept honey and fed him verses. Every mirror in the rectory cracked that week, all in the same pattern, 4 figures kneeling, 1 floating. The word domina appeared in the fog of one bathroom mirror. Julian's drawings shifted. At school, he stopped sketching trees and started drawing rooms underground, always with an altar, always lit with candles no one could blow out. The page finally dried the day after he turned 13, but a new one appeared inside the Bible. Blank. Cold. Waiting. That night, a woman in robes stood in his room. She did not blink. She only whispered, "It's your turn." And when she vanished, Julian found a new rosary under his pillow, carved from bone. Villagers awoke to footsteps on cobblestone. At 3:33 a.m., bare feet shuffled quietly through the town square. No voices, just a procession of shadows headed toward the church. Julian walked among them, not leading, not following. Just in step, eyes closed, rosary clutched, head bowed. The Maybe tower doors opened, the procession vanished inside. The bell did not ring, but dogs howled from every street like mourning. Witnesses claimed to see robes swaying and candles hovering without flame. One man filmed it, but every file erased itself the moment he hit play. Julian returned at dawn, eyes gray again, hands stained red. He said, "She's beneath. She's listening." The priest begged him to stop. Julian laughed. The first time he'd laughed in weeks. But it sounded like someone else's voice. After that, the town began hearing bells in water, in bathtubs, in rain barrels, in teacups, always distant, always calling. Children began walking in circles, forming patterns, same ones etched into the chapel ruins. No one taught them. They just knew. One girl wrote "Agnes Lives" on her school window, backwards, in sap. And that night, the chapel ruins glowed. Pages began appearing in hymnals, psalms no one recognized, numbered into the 200s. Each verse darker, older, filled with instructions about silence, soil, and sacrifice. Julian read them aloud. Each time, the wind changed, windows cracked, the trees leaned, even the clouds shifted pattern. The priest locked the doors, burned one hymnal, but the next day, the pages were back, and handwritten across his own walls. The last psalm read, "All prayer returns through root. All voices sink until silence finds their weight." The church roof began dripping water when the sky was dry. Each drop echoed like footfalls in stone halls underground. Julian stopped sleeping. He just stared at the stars, said, "That's not heaven. That's the ceiling." He brought candles to the woods, placed them in a ring, sat inside, hummed. The forest stopped chirping. Wind halted. Even the insects froze. The candles leaned toward him like drawn by breath. He stood and whispered, "I'll go." And behind him, a fifth robe folded itself. The tower lit itself one morning, windows glowing. The bell turned black. Inside, 5 candles burned, but only 4 had melted wax. Julian stood before the 5th. It burned cold. The flame blew. It cast no shadow. He touched the wax, said it whispered, said it knew him. A voice spoke from the bell, low, female, cracking like roots through ice. "Domina awaits." The wind repeated it. So did the school speakers, and the pipes under town. All crucifixes turned upside down that day. Not malicious, just reversed, like looking in a mirror that remembered. Julian placed the rosary on the church steps. It bled. Not red, but black. Children drew symbols on the sidewalks. Circles, candles, names. All 4. Always 4. No one stopped them. No one dared. And that night, the 5th candle finally dripped. Julian found the well behind the church. Old, dry, covered in moss. But the stone rim felt warm. He dropped a pebble, heard no splash, just a soft breath exhale upward. He returned at midnight, lowered a mirror, saw 4 faces behind his own, smiling, silent. The 5th wore no face. He pulled up a bucket. Inside, a folded cloth, a nun's veil, damp, smelling of lavender and blood. Underneath, a single page, torn from a Bible. Verse unnumbered. Words etched in reverse. Silence is not absence. It is the deepest form of presence. Julian began writing his own psalms. He carried them to the woods, buried them near tree roots. Candles followed him now, not carried, just moving. He spoke only in Scripture, words no one else remembered. And beneath the well, the ground pulsed. The earth beneath the old chapel hummed now. Only between 3:30 and 3:34 a.m. people stayed awake. Some wept, others prayed, but most just listened. Julian stood in the ruins, eyes closed, whispering names, one each night. When he finished, the humming stopped, like the ground was taking roll. The priest stood beside him once, tried to join in, but when he said a name, he bled from his ears. Julian turned slowly, said, "You were not called." That night, the wind in town reversed direction. The clock tower struck 13, and a new hymn played in the school speakers, one no one had ever composed. The veil from the well vanished. In its place, a note. "Bury what remembers you, or you will remember forever." Julian vanished for 3 nights. Returned barefoot, dirt-stained, carved words into his arms. Margaret, Claire, Eloise, Agnes, Domina. The town awoke to chanting in the woods. Every tree tilted toward the sound. And deep beneath the chapel, A second heartbeat began. At the edge of the woods, candles began appearing in perfect rings. No matches, no hands, just fire that knew where it belonged. Julian placed a book at the center. It wasn't the Bible, just blank pages filled with names, all written in the same handwriting. None were his. One by one, townspeople followed him into the forest. Silently. Always at dusk. Some returned changed. Others didn't speak again. A woman came back, humming a lullaby no one recognized. Said she heard it from someone buried in the trees. Julian buried another veil. This one wasn't stained. It was new, embroidered with the word return. The wind carried laughter that night, soft, feminine, too many voices to count. It echoed through windows left ajar. The church tower swayed gently, though the air was still. The bell did not ring, but the ropes curled like vines. A new psalm appeared on Julian's wall, written in ash. She never left. She waited beneath the breath. No one slept soundly. The trees whispered their names. Some started whispering back, and the forest, for the first time, opened a path that hadn't been there yesterday. In the center of the chapel ruins, a mirror appeared overnight, 6 feet tall, framed in wood that matched the altar, untouched by time or weather. When Julian looked into it, he saw the chapel whole again. 4 sisters praying. A 5th standing behind the pulpit. Her face blurred. He placed the Bible before the mirror. The pages turned themselves. Stopped on Psalms, verse 231. Not in any known edition. The reflection smiled at him, but he hadn't moved. His eyes glowed in the glass, faint white, steady. He didn't blink. Someone tried to remove the mirror. It shattered in their hands, then reformed the next day, unbroken. At midnight, the mirror glowed. People stood before it. Some saw the forest. Some saw the chapel. A few saw themselves, older, buried. Julian wrote a sermon that night, 10 verses, no ink, just pressed into paper like weight, not words. He read it to the mirror. The glass rippled. The wind stopped. The candles around the ruins all went out at once. The final line was, "Those who vanish do not leave, they echo." And behind the glass, 5 robes floated in perfect silence. Choirs began singing from the woods. No mouths, just sound, full harmony. Always 4 parts. Always at 3:33 a.m. Julian lit candles in his room. They joined in. The flames danced with rhythm, flickered in sync with every note. One morning, he found wax footprints on his ceiling. Small, bare, pointing toward the door. He followed them to the chapel. There, in the ruins, 4 wax figures stood, kneeling, silent, melting slowly. They wore habits, carved eyes, no mouths. But one had a note pinned to her chest. Choir begins when no one listens. The priest tried to bless the sight. His crucifix turned to wax, melted in his palm, burned nothing. Julian wept beside the figures. One wept wax with him. They pooled together. Each candle in town went out, except one in the tower window, its flame shaped like a face. The town wrote a song together without meeting. Same melody, same words. All wrote it on the same night. Julian sang it aloud, and the figures moved their heads. Julian stopped speaking. Not silent, just empty. Words came out, but no one heard them. Only the forest responded. Trees leaned in, leaves shook. He carried no books now, just a staff carved from pine. At the top, the domina cross, inverted, floating slightly above the wood. The priest begged him to stop, but Julian only mouthed words. His voice came from underground. The bell rang backwards that week. Sound pulled inward. People heard their names unspoken. Some wept, others vanished. A shadow figure stood on rooftops, moved from house to house, always watching windows. Never entered, never blinked. Julian slept at the ruins now. One eye always open, one candle never burning. Villagers wrote their confessions on leaves, buried them under trees. Every leaf disappeared by morning. The chapel pulpit returned. No one built it, just appeared. Hollow inside. Sound echoed through it without cause. Julian placed a note inside it. They hear us better when we whisper, and from below a choir responded. We never stopped. Julian began writing directly into dirt. No tool, just finger. Every message remained, even through rain. Words hardened into stone. He taught others to do the same. They wrote dreams, fears, lost names. Each word bloomed a new flower, always white. The forest grew paths between writings. Trees opened. Moss spread without pattern, until it shaped verses across the hillside. Children followed them in silence, ended in circles, cried without knowing why. Some sang. None remembered. Julian dug up an old shoe. Inside, a bone rosary, still warm, still humming. The church foundation turned to soft grass. Candles grew like mushrooms, smelled of honey, blood, and salt. Julian whispered a blessing. The roots shook. Stones glowed. Bells didn't ring, but sang. No birds entered the trees anymore. Only silence. A respectful kind. A knowing kind. Julian slept inside the circle of flowers. One nun watched him in dreams, always smiling, always quiet. He named her Domina, and she bowed once. One candle stayed lit after sunrise. It never melted. It never flickered. It just watched. Julian placed it in a glass case. The flame curved toward whoever entered the room. Like it recognized them, he brought it to the tower. Set it where the fifth robe once lay. The flame turned violet, whispered his name. The priest lit another candle beside it. It went out instantly. The glass cracked. At midnight, all lights in town went dark. Except that one. It pulsed. The townspeople gathered beneath it. No words, just eyes fixed upward. Julian stepped forward, held his arms out. The candle rose from its case. Everyone knelt. Even the wind paused. A second light appeared beside it. Then a third, fourth, fifth. And in that glow, the forest breathed like lungs. Everyone in town received a letter. No stamp, no sender. Just folded parchment slipped under their doors. The ink smelled like ash and rain. Inside, one line. You were always meant to hear this. Some ignored it. Others framed it. But all of them kept it. None could throw it away. The priest found his sealed with wax. Inside, a psalm he'd never read. Verse 232. Line by line, it read like prophecy. Julian received no letter. He didn't need one. His hands already carried the message, carved deep, faintly glowing at night. One woman read hers aloud near the tower. Her voice echoed 5 times. The bell rang once. The wind stopped. A boy read his backward and forgot his name for 3 days. When he remembered it, it wasn't the same name. The letters weren't paper anymore. They became etched in mirrors, reflected in puddles, carved into frost on windows. Every copy of the town Bible turned to the same page, blank except for 5 words. She waits where roots dream. And in the forest, candles began walking without holders. The ruins vanished overnight. Not faded, vanished. In their place stood a chapel, pristine, ancient, quiet. Smelled of pine and memory. No doors opened. No one entered. But smoke curled from its chimney. Bell never rang. Still, everyone heard it. Julian stood before it, closed his eyes, whispered, "We're home." Villagers gathered in silence, knelt in the grass, waited. Wind moved through them like a prayer. The priest tried to touch the wall. His hand passed through. He wept and said, "It's not for me." Children began drawing the chapel in class, perfectly detailed. Even the symbols. None of them had ever seen it before. Julian left flowers at the threshold. They bloomed instantly. Their petals formed verses, faded before anyone could read them. At dusk, 5 candles lit themselves on the chapel steps, one for each sister, the 5th brighter than the others. That night, the choir returned, not from the woods, from the earth, and the chapel doors opened, without a sound. A new figure appeared on the hill, dressed in black, veiled, never moved, never entered the chapel, just watched. Julian saw her first, nodded to her. She didn't nod back, only stepped once closer each sunset. She left no footprints, but the grass beneath her withered, grew back in spiral shapes. The town called her the Watcher. Some feared her. Others prayed to her. A few said she looked familiar. The mirror pulpit reflected her face once, but it was Julian's mother's. Young, smiling, crying blood. She began writing on stones, names, dates, locations no map knew. Julian asked her a question once. "Is it time?" She lifted her veil. Her mouth was sewn shut, with rosary beads. He bowed to her, placed his staff at her feet. The beads unclasped and vanished into dust. And for the first time she turned and walked toward the chapel. The chapel bell rang at midnight. Once. Then again. Then 5 times total. Each ring echoed like breath, like crying held in too long. The sound left water stains on ceilings. Holy water turned red for a moment. Statues in town tilted their heads. The watcher knelt in front of the bell tower. Her veil floated above her face, her mouth still gone. Julian stood beside her, eyes shut, hands open. The bell stopped, but the air still rang. Children woke from dreams, saying, "She's back." Candles in the forest bent toward the bell tower, flames burning low, humming softly. The Bible pages rewrote themselves, psalms erased, replaced with verses about roots, echoes, and rain. Someone recorded the bell, played it backward, heard a name whispered beneath the chimes, Domina, and beside that, laughter, warm, sad, familiar. The chapel cried that night. Sap ran from its walls. The trees bowed in silence. The chapel hosted one service, one night. No priest, no seats. Just 5 robes folded on the altar and a single flame burning violet. The entire town came. Not invited, just drawn. No one spoke. No one coughed. It wasn't silence. It was listening. Julian stood before the flame, hands outstretched, said nothing. Still, every person heard a sermon. Their own. Some wept. Others sang. A few dropped to their knees without knowing why. The watcher entered last. Her steps left no sound. She sat beside the robes, and the candle turned white. When it dimmed, a new rosary lay beside her. Wood, teeth, names carved in gold. One by one, the congregation left. But none could remember what they heard, only how they felt. Julian locked the doors, turned once, bowed, and whispered, "We're not finished." The flame blinked. The robes vanished, and the church was empty again, but never felt more full. Julian began hearing a new voice, not loud, not outside. It spoke beneath his thoughts, a whisper made of memory. It asked questions, simple ones. Do you remember their faces? Would you still go if no one returned? He wrote the answers in the dirt. The ground pulsed with each line. The 5th voice grew stronger. It sang through broken windows, through roots, through ink spilled by accident. Children hummed it in sleep, woke crying, not afraid, just knowing. Julian carved the hymn into bark. Trees glowed faintly where he wrote. One tree bent. A branch touched his shoulder. He whispered, "I'm ready." The wind stopped. The watcher vanished. A 5th robe folded itself on the altar, and at 3:33, the bell didn't ring. It sang. Everyone heard their name inside it. A new door appeared in the chapel wall. No knob, just glass. It showed reflections that weren't real, people long gone, rooms that never existed, light with no source. Julian entered alone. The moment he crossed, the glass rippled. Behind him, the door disappeared. Inside, pews floated. Candles burned upside down, and every window looked out onto different seasons. In the center, a mirror shaped like an eye. It blinked slowly. Once, every 5 heartbeats. Julian approached. The mirror didn't reflect him. It showed 5 women kneeling, robes wet with soil. One stood behind them, arms raised. He whispered, "Domina." The eye closed. The candles blinked out. A single note played, one that split his memory down the center. When he returned, his hands were folded in prayer. His lips moved in silence, and his eyes glowed. He said only this, "We are becoming echoes." And behind him, the reflection door sealed itself in stone. Lanterns appeared along the old forest trail. Dim gold, hung from no hooks, just floating. They pulsed faintly like heartbeats, spaced exactly 13 steps apart. Julian walked the path, not invited, expected. The wind parted for him. The IBD trees leaned close. Each lantern whispered a name. Old names. Names he didn't know, but felt he'd forgotten. Halfway through, he met the watcher, but she no longer wore the veil. Her eyes were mirrors now. They reflected Julian, younger, smiling. She spoke for the first time. "The last sermon is written in ash." Julian followed her to the end, found a stump carved with verses, still warm, still bleeding sap. The ground pulsed beneath it, like breath, like waiting. Julian knelt, kissed the stump, whispered one line, "Let them rise." The lanterns blinked out, one by one. The final one turned violet, and behind them, the forest began to hum. That night, roots cracked through the chapel floor, not breaking, reclaiming. They formed shapes, letters, verses, new scripture grown from beneath. Julian read it, didn't blink, didn't breathe. The words weren't in Latin, weren't in English, just meant. One verse glowed brighter. "Those buried in silence, rise first." The townspeople returned, sat in pews made of vines. None spoke, but all listened. Julian stood barefoot at the altar, held no book. Still, pages turned before him. Wind flipped, them with purpose. He opened his mouth. A voice, not his, filled the air. Full, ancient, rooted. He sang the root psalm. Soil vibrated. Trees swayed in rhythm. Flowers bloomed instantly and rose. One by one, white-robed figures stepped from the shadows. Not ghosts, not people. Something in between. Julian bowed. The choir began to hum, and the chapel pulsed like a living heart. The altar cracked open, not shattered, parted. Inside, scrolls, hundreds, rolled in wax, bound in rosary. Julian unrolled one, read the first name aloud. The wind stopped. A voice answered from below. He read another. A white candle lit in the forest. Soon the whole town gathered, each handed a scroll. Some cried, some smiled, some refused to open theirs. The names weren't of the living. They were memories. People the earth hadn't forgotten. Julian placed the final scroll at the altar. The chapel doors locked behind him. One last verse appeared on the altar. "We are what silence writes when no One listens. The priest fainted, said he heard his mother's voice from beneath the pew. Julian closed his eyes, raised his hands, and the altar turned to stone. The Bible returned, opened to a new page, just one, handwritten, dated March the 12th, 1980, the night the nuns vanished. It read, "This is not the end. This is the remembering." Julian brought it to the pulpit, laid it flat. Candles all extinguished themselves at once. Everyone inside the chapel whispered the same line. None had rehearsed it. "We carry what the roots remember." The bell rang once. No hands pulled the rope. It echoed longer than sound should. Julian turned. The watcher stood behind him, her face visible now. It was his. He smiled, took her hand, walked into the aisle as the choir hummed. Every pew bowed, every person stood. The forest bent inward. The last page closed itself, and in that silence, everyone knew the story had always been about them. Years passed, but the candle on the altar never went out, not once, not through storm, not through time. The chapel still stands, empty, yet full, quiet, yet humming, like memory breathing. New children visit, draw strange symbols, speak in whispers. Some say their names changed after entering. One girl lit a match near the altar. The flame bowed to the eternal candle, then vanished. Every March 12th, the town walks the path, places flowers, reads names aloud. Each time, a new name is added. Julian's seat remains empty. His staff still leans near the door, but no one touches it. A new verse appears each spring on the chapel wall. No hand seen. Always signed, Domina. They've stopped trying to explain. Some things aren't meant to be solved, just carried. And when the wind shifts just right, the forest still sings. Because what was planted never really left. The rain returned after years, but it wasn't cold. Each drop shimmered faintly, glowing as it touched ground, forming letters where it pooled. Children ran outside. They didn't dance. They read. Words appeared in puddles. Verses never taught. Names never spoken. Julian's name formed last, then vanished before he could touch it. He smiled, whispered, "I'm remembered." The chapel doors opened wide. The rain refused to enter, but the scent of earth and scripture flowed from within. The bell rang again. 5 notes, one for each sister. But this time, a 6th followed. Softer, distant. Inside, pews were full. Yet no one had arrived. Shadows sat in reverence. Light flickered above every seat. The altar wept wax. Each drip spelling one line. Nothing rooted is ever truly gone. Julian carved the message into the chapel wall. Didn't use a tool, just his finger. Outside, the rain stopped, but the names remained in stone, glowing beneath the grass. And for the first time, the town walked barefoot through memory. Julian knelt at the altar, dug beneath it, with his bare hands. The soil was soft, like it had been waiting to be touched. He found something wrapped in linen, still warm. A seed shaped like a cross. Sap pulsing beneath its skin. He brought it to the pulpit, held it high. The forest leaned closer. The candle flared. A voice filled the chapel. Every mouth spoke, though no one moved their lips. Plant where silence is loudest. Julian walked alone to the edge of town, where old stones lay, where prayers had been buried and forgotten. He dug, gently, placed the seed, whispered nothing, just covered it with care. The ground throbbed once. A faint hum spread through roots, through water, through dream. Julian bowed. When he stood, a single white flower had already bloomed. The town saw it and fell silent. Not scared, reverent, as if something holy had just been returned, and beneath the soil, the seed began to sing. On the eve of the anniversary, the chapel lit itself. Every window glowed. Bells rang without hands. Smoke curled in shapes of praying sisters. Julian stood outside, arms open. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The forest echoed every word he didn't say. One by one, the villagers came. Each brought something, a name, a candle, a verse. The robes returned to the altar. All 5, folded, fresh. And beside them, a 6th, smaller, woven with Julian's name. The watcher stood at the door, but she looked like everyone now. Every face, every memory, every forgotten prayer. The choir returned. No mouths, just sound. It rose from the earth like steam, filled the lungs, sank into the walls. Julian stepped into the chapel, placed his staff beside the 6th robe. He sat in the pew, closed his eyes, and the whole town whispered, "We remember." The bell rang once, and the candle stayed burning. Years passed. Generations, maybe. No one rebuilt the chapel. No one had to. It never aged, never changed, just waited. Visitors came from far away. None remembered why, but they stayed long enough to cry. Children born in silence learned to hum the Aiti old songs before they could walk, before they were told. The seed Julian planted became a tree, white-barked, black leaves. Its roots spread beneath the town, pulsing memory into water. The town's name changed, or maybe it never had one. Maps refused to print it. GPS blinked and froze. Every March 12th, the candles reappear. Each house, each doorstep, all lit, all untouched. The 6th robe remains untouched, but never dusty, never forgotten. On clear nights, the wind hums a 5-part harmony, but always ends in a 6th note, unfinished, echoing. No one forgets the nuns anymore, because what the root remembers never leaves.